In 1985, Trooper Daniel Harris was 29 years old and full of energy. He was proud of his job, wearing his uniform with dignity every single day. He had grown up in a small town where everybody knew everybody, and people often said Daniel was the kind of person who made them feel safe just by standing nearby. His mother would smile when neighbors came up to her and said, "You raised a good son." He was known not only for being disciplined and serious about his work, but also for being kind, respectful, and patient with the people he met on duty. That summer night in 1985 started out just like any other. The highway he patrolled was long, quiet, and stretched through farmland and wooded areas. Most nights, he would drive for hours with only the hum of his engine and the sound of the radio to keep him company. Sometimes, he would stop at a gas station to grab a coffee or chat briefly with a local truck driver. People who drove that road often said they felt comforted seeing Daniel's patrol car parked on the side, lights flashing faintly in the distance. Shortly before midnight, the police radio crackled with his calm voice. He reported seeing a suspicious vehicle, a dark Buick sedan, parked on a narrow dirt road that branched off the highway. There was nothing unusual about cars pulling off the road, but Daniel's instincts told him something wasn't right. The Buick looked abandoned, sitting there with no lights on, and the spot was far from any house or business. Trooper Harris parked his cruiser nearby and stepped out, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. The night air was still and heavy, the kind of silence that makes a person's heart beat just a little louder. That was the last time anyone ever heard from him. A few minutes later, another patrol officer drove past that same stretch of highway. He noticed Daniel's cruiser still sitting there, the headlights glowing dimly. Curious, he stopped to check in. What he found made his stomach sink. The engine of the patrol car was still running, the driver's door stood slightly open, and Daniel's hat lay on the ground as if it had been dropped in a hurry. But Daniel himself was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had simply stepped into the dark and vanished. When the radio calls went unanswered, the police force reacted quickly. Officers spread out in all directions, their flashlights sweeping through the tall grass, ditches, and wooded areas nearby. They shouted Daniel's name into the night, listening desperately for an answer that never came. Helicopters searched from above, their beams of light cutting across the fields. Dogs were brought in to track his scent, but they lost the trail only a short distance from where the cruiser was parked. The town woke up the next morning to shocking news. People gathered in small groups at diners, gas stations, and church steps, whispering about what could have happened. Parents told their children not to wander far. Farmers looked out at their land with unease. Daniel Harris was not just any trooper, he was one of them, someone who had grown up playing baseball in their parks and sitting in their school classrooms. His disappearance felt personal, like a piece of the town itself had gone missing. At first, everyone believed he would be found quickly. Maybe he had chased someone into the woods and gotten hurt. Maybe he was lost but alive, waiting for help. Search parties grew larger as days passed, with volunteers combing through fields, barns, and even abandoned wells. Flyers with his picture, clean-cut hair, square jaw, warm smile were pinned to grocery store boards and taped to lamp posts. His mother, holding on to hope, lit a candle in her window each night, telling neighbors that Daniel would find his way back home when he saw the light. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no sign of him. The case grew colder with every unanswered question. His fellow officers felt a heavy guilt, as if they had failed to protect one of their own. Some replayed the details of that night in their minds over and over, wondering if they had missed something obvious. The Buick he had reported was gone by the time backup arrived, leaving behind only tire tracks that disappeared into the mud. There were rumors of strange men seen near the highway in the days before, but none of the leads went anywhere solid. The community clung to every scrap of information, desperate for answers. Some people whispered that Daniel must have been ambushed by someone he had arrested in the past, someone seeking revenge. Others wondered if he had stumbled upon a crime in progress and been silenced before he could call for help. A few even suggested that maybe he had chosen to disappear, though those who knew him best fiercely rejected that idea. Daniel was not the kind of man to walk away from his family, his friends, or his duty. The absence left a deep wound. His mother never stopped keeping that candle burning, and his younger brother would often sit by the window, staring at the dark road, imagining Daniel's silhouette walking toward the house. Fellow troopers, even years later, admitted that they felt a chill whenever they drove past the spot where the cruiser had been found. They called it Harris's Stretch, a quiet warning passed down to new recruits. The town carried on, but the mystery never faded. Every anniversary of his disappearance brought a renewed wave of articles, interviews, and candlelight vigils. Strangers wrote letters to the family, sending prayers and words of encouragement. Daniel's story became more than just a local tragedy. It was a reminder of how quickly life can change, how one ordinary night could turn into a haunting mystery. 15 years would pass before the silence of that night began to break. But in 1985, all anyone knew was that a good man had vanished, leaving behind only an idling car, a fallen hat, and a road that would never feel the same again. The months after Trooper Daniel Harris vanished were some of the hardest days the town had ever seen. At first, people thought it was only a matter of time before answers would come. But when the leaves turned red and gold that autumn, and still no trace of him was found, the feeling of dread became heavier. By winter, hope had started to fade. The snow covered the roads where he had last been seen, and the silence of the season felt almost cruel, as if nature itself was erasing the clues. The case remained open, but the trail had gone cold. Detectives filed reports, interviewed locals, and checked records of suspicious vehicles, but every lead seemed to hit a dead end. The Buick Daniel reported seeing that night had never been found. Tire tracks had been washed away by rain, and any evidence left at the scene had been ruined by weather and time. Investigators knew that without new information, the mystery might never be solved. For Daniel's family, life was never the same. His mother refused to move his belongings from his room. His hat, his shoes, his books all stayed exactly where he had left them. She said it comforted her, because if he ever came home, he would know nothing had changed. Every night, she lit the candle in the window, her quiet way of saying she still believed. His younger brother, Mark, grew quieter as the years passed. He often told friends that losing Daniel felt like losing his shadow, because Daniel had always been the one protecting him. In town, people still talked about Daniel, but their voices lowered when they spoke his name. He became more than a person, he became a story, one that parents told their children when they explained why it was important to be careful at night. Some said it was a warning of the dangers that could be hiding on lonely roads. Others said it was a reminder that even the strongest and bravest could be vulnerable. But underneath all the talk, there was a shared sadness that never really went away. The police department carried the weight of his disappearance for years. Older officers who had been there that night often looked haunted when asked about it. New recruits were told about Daniel during their training. They were warned about the unpredictable nature of the job and reminded that sometimes, even when you do everything right, things can still go terribly wrong. His photograph was placed on the wall of the station, a daily reminder that one of their own had gone missing while serving the community. Every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, his family and colleagues held a vigil at the church. Candles flickered as people shared memories of him, his easy laugh, his steady hands, the way he once stopped to fix an old woman's flat tire on his way to work. The gatherings were filled with both love and sorrow, and while they gave comfort, they also reminded everyone how much had been lost. As time moved forward, the world around them changed, but the mystery stayed the same. Technology advanced, new investigators reviewed the case with fresh eyes, but still no answers came. Files grew thicker as more reports were added, but the truth stayed hidden. Detectives would sometimes say that it was like chasing a shadow, you could see the outline, but never touch it. The rumors never stopped. Some believed Daniel had been caught up in something bigger than anyone realized, perhaps uncovering a secret that someone wanted to keep buried. Others thought he had been kidnapped and taken far away, though no ransom had ever been demanded. A few whispered cruel theories, suggesting he had run away to start a new life, but those who knew him best dismissed the idea. Daniel had been too dedicated to his duty, too close to his family, to simply abandon them. Mark, who had once been a boy watching for his brother at the window, grew into a man still carrying the unanswered questions. He often visited the highway where Daniel disappeared, standing quietly by the roadside, staring into the woods as if trying to see what his brother had seen that night. He spoke sometimes with the officers who had worked the case, asking questions they could not answer. All he wanted was the truth, but the silence remained. The town itself seemed unable to move past the mystery. People avoided that dirt road at night, saying it gave them a feeling of unease. Truck drivers who passed through often spoke of strange chills they felt in that area, as if the land itself remembered what had happened. For 15 long years, the story of Trooper Harris was told and retold, but it always ended the same way, with a question mark. Yet through all those years, his mother never gave up. Each evening, she lit the candle, even as her hair turned white and her steps grew slower. She believed that someday, the truth would come out. She would sit by the window, her hands folded in her lap, watching the flame flicker against the glass. People admired her strength, though they also pitied her. They wondered how she could keep hoping when there had been no sign for so long. But for her, hope was the only thing left to hold onto. The police eventually declared the case inactive, meaning no active leads remained, though it was never officially closed. It sat in the records room, gathering dust, but always there, waiting. Officers who worked late shifts sometimes flipped through the file when the nights were quiet, as if rereading it might reveal something they had missed before. The disappearance of Trooper Harris became part of the department's history, a reminder that not every mystery is solved quickly, or at all. Then, as the years stretched into the new century, whispers began again. People started noticing changes in the old farmland at the edge of town, where a pond had long sat undisturbed. The land had been sold to a new farmer, who planned to drain the pond and use the space for crops. At first, no one thought much of it. But soon, rumors spread that something unusual had been found beneath the water. For 15 years, the truth of what happened that night in 1985 had remained hidden. The town had lived with unanswered questions, carrying the weight of uncertainty in their hearts. But now, in the year 2000, something was about to surface, something that would finally shine a light on the mystery of Trooper Harris. The stage was set, though no one yet knew it. The old pond, quiet for decades, was about to reveal its secret. It was a crisp spring morning when the new farmer, Jacob Reynolds, decided to finally drain the old pond. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the fields, and birds chirped as if nothing unusual was about to happen. Jacob had purchased the land from an estate sale, not knowing much about its history, and he saw the pond as wasted space. With determination, he began operating his equipment, careful to follow every precaution. As the water slowly drained, the pond's bottom began to emerge. The mud was thick and dark, clinging to boots and machinery alike. Jacob worked methodically, but as the last of the water receded, he noticed something strange. At first, he thought it was just a pile of debris, old branches, leaves, maybe a log washed down from the nearby woods. But the shape seemed unusual, too symmetrical and solid to be natural. Curiosity got the better of him. He set aside his tools and stepped closer, brushing away the mud with gloved hands. That was when he saw the unmistakable outline of a vehicle, a car, half buried and completely rusted. His heart began to race as he realized it was a Buick, the same kind that had been reported missing all those years ago in the 1985 case of Trooper Daniel Harris. Jacob froze for a moment, unsure if he should call the authorities immediately or keep looking. Finally, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Within an hour, police cars surrounded the area. Detectives and officers, some of whom had grown up hearing stories about Daniel's disappearance, arrived with equipment, cameras, and caution. The Buick was carefully unearthed from the mud, its body corroded but still recognizable. Its windows were caked with years of sediment, and the interior was nearly filled with mud and debris. There was no question it matched the description of the vehicle Daniel had reported that night in 1985. The news spread through the town like wildfire. People gathered at the edge of the property, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the investigation. Many whispered among themselves, some crying quietly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. It had been 15 years of waiting, 15 years of silence, and now, finally, there was a lead. The discovery of the Buick promised answers, or at least the hope of them. Detectives carefully examined the car. The doors were locked, and the windows were stuck fast, so they had to remove them slowly to avoid disturbing anything inside. What they found sent a shiver down everyone's spine. Inside the driver's seat, almost perfectly preserved under the mud and rust, lay Daniel's badge, his hat, and a few personal items. It was as if the vehicle had been left there intentionally, hidden away but not entirely destroyed. The most shocking discovery, however, came when they peered into the back seat. There, tucked away under old blankets and layers of sediment, were personal belongings that clearly belonged to Daniel. His wallet, a pocket notebook, and even a few letters that had never been mailed. Everything seemed to tell a story, though the story was still incomplete. The Buick held pieces of the puzzle that no one had seen for 15 years, but the most important piece, the trooper himself, was still missing. The investigation intensified. Forensic teams were called in to examine every inch of the vehicle and the surrounding area. They took soil samples, analyzed tire marks that had survived the mud, and carefully catalogued each item found inside the car. The discovery reignited old leads, forcing investigators to revisit interviews and evidence from 1985. People who had long ago stopped talking about the case were contacted again, their memories refreshed by the shocking find. Meanwhile, Daniel's family was informed immediately. His mother and brother arrived at the scene, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope, fear, and disbelief. Seeing the car brought back memories that had long been buried under grief. His mother ran her hands over the rusted metal, tears streaming down her face. "He's here," she whispered, almost as if saying it out loud would make it real. Mark, Daniel's younger brother, stood silently, staring at the seat where his brother had last been. For the first time in 15 years, he felt a connection, a tangible reminder that Daniel had been there, even if only through his belongings. Detectives focused on the Buick for weeks. They found small but crucial clues, fingerprints, traces of fabric, and even a few items that suggested someone else had been near the vehicle. While it was still unclear exactly what had happened, these findings indicated that Daniel's disappearance might not have been random. There were signs that the trooper had encountered someone or something after he left the highway that night. For the town, the discovery stirred a mixture of relief and fear. Relief, because after 15 years, a piece of the mystery had been uncovered. Fear, because the unanswered questions remained. How did the Buick end up in the pond? Who or what had placed it there? And most importantly, where was Daniel? The excitement of discovery was tempered by the haunting reality that this was only part of the story. As news of the find reached the media, journalists arrived from nearby cities, hoping to cover the story that had captivated generations. Interviews were conducted, photographs taken, and the car became a focal point for both local and national attention. Experts in forensics and missing persons cases weighed in, suggesting theories based on the evidence. Some believed Daniel had been investigating something dangerous when he disappeared, while others thought it could have been an accident that led to the car being hidden in the pond. Despite all the attention, the mystery of Daniel Harris remained. The Buick provided answers about where he had been after leaving the highway, but it raised more questions than it solved. The trooper himself had not been found, and without him, the story could not be complete. Investigators continued to follow every lead, searching nearby woods, abandoned buildings, and even areas far from town. Each day brought new hope, but also the constant reminder of the years that had passed without any trace of him. For Daniel's family, the discovery was bittersweet. They were grateful to have his belongings returned, evidence of his presence after so long, but they longed for the one thing that remained missing, him. His mother insisted on keeping the items she could, placing them carefully in her home as if keeping him close. Mark spent hours studying the items, looking for anything that might reveal a clue about what had happened to his brother. They both understood that the answers might never come fully, but at least now, they had something tangible to hold onto, a connection to the man they loved and missed every single day. As weeks turned into months, the discovery of the Buick continued to inspire hope and fear in the community. The pond where it had been hidden became a place of reflection, a quiet reminder of both mystery and perseverance. People spoke of Daniel not just as a missing trooper, but as a symbol of dedication, courage, and the lingering power of unanswered questions. Children growing up in town heard the story as part of their history, learning the importance of community, vigilance, and never giving up hope, no matter how long the wait. Even with all the investigation and attention, the truth remained elusive. The Buick revealed a chapter of the story, but the ending, the one everyone wanted, was still hidden somewhere. It was a reminder that some mysteries take years to unfold, and that the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected. And for the family, for the police, and for the town, the hope of seeing Daniel again remained alive, even after 15 long, agonizing years. The discovery of the Buick had shaken the town to its core, and the investigation was now in full swing. Detectives combed through every inch of the car and the surrounding area, hoping to uncover anything that might lead to Daniel Harris himself. It was clear that the trooper's disappearance was not a simple accident. The vehicle's location, the way it had been hidden for 15 years, and the items inside suggested someone had gone to great lengths to conceal what had happened that night. Forensic teams carefully analyzed the car, taking samples from the interior and exterior. Every scrap of evidence, every fingerprint, and even the rust patterns were examined. They discovered something that made hearts race: faint tire marks leading away from the pond into a dense part of the woods nearby. The tracks were partially obscured by decades of fallen leaves, but with modern technology, they were able to reconstruct a probable path. It suggested that Daniel had been taken further into the forest rather than simply left near the pond. The forest had always been a place of mystery for the town. Locals whispered that strange sounds and lights were sometimes seen there at night, and some avoided the area entirely. Now, with the new evidence, it became a central point in the investigation. Detectives and search teams moved carefully through the trees, using both ground and drone surveillance. They were looking for any sign of a hidden structure, a place where someone might have kept a person, or evidence left behind. Every sound of a snapping branch, every rustle of leaves, made hearts race and minds imagine what had happened all those years ago. Meanwhile, Daniel's family was on edge. His mother insisted on accompanying the search teams whenever possible, refusing to sit idly at home. She felt that being near the area where the car had been found might bring her closer to answers. Mark, too, wanted to help. He spent hours reviewing maps, tracking the patterns of the tire marks, and even walking the forest paths during the day, hoping to find something that the professionals might have missed. Both of them knew it was unlikely to find Daniel alive after so many years, but they couldn't let go of hope. It was all they had. Detectives began interviewing anyone who might have had information back in 1985. Some remembered seeing strange vehicles on the road at night. Others recalled hearing rumors about a man who had been acting suspiciously near the highway that Daniel had patrolled. A few even mentioned seeing someone hauling heavy objects into the woods, though no one had come forward officially at the time. These scattered memories, combined with modern forensics, slowly started to create a clearer picture of the events leading up to the disappearance. Inside the Buick, forensic experts discovered something remarkable. Among the personal items was a small notebook Daniel had kept. It was water damaged, but portions of the pages were still readable. In it, Daniel had written about his daily routines, the people he had met, and the unusual encounters on the night he disappeared. There was mention of the strange Buick he had followed, a vehicle that seemed out of place and suspicious. He had also written about a sense of being watched, and how he had tried to report it, but nothing had seemed official at the time. The notebook gave a glimpse into Daniel's thoughts and fears that night, making the case feel much more personal. The town watched closely as the investigation continued. People came forward with new memories and observations, hoping to contribute to solving the mystery. Some old neighbors remembered seeing a man in a dark coat near the edge of the forest on the night of Daniel's disappearance. Others mentioned strange sounds, like engines running in the middle of the night, that they had assumed were nothing at the time. Every detail, no matter how small, became a potential clue. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired truck driver, who had been living quietly outside the town, came forward. He claimed to have seen something unusual on the night of Daniel's disappearance. According to him, he had noticed a rusted Buick parked near a side road, with its engine running and lights off. He had seen two men struggling with someone in a police uniform. At the time, he had been too scared to intervene, assuming it was some criminal activity, and had driven away. But now, hearing about the car found in the pond, he realized that what he had seen might have been connected. His testimony added urgency and direction to the investigation. Using this information, detectives focused their search in a specific area of the forest. They discovered a hidden trail, overgrown but still traceable. Following it, they found the remains of a small cabin, long abandoned and decaying. The structure appeared to have been used for storage, and investigators believed it could have been a place where Daniel had been held. Inside, they found old furniture, some remnants of clothing, and other objects that suggested someone had lived there temporarily. While there was no sign of Daniel himself, the cabin provided the first real evidence of his possible location after leaving the highway. The discovery of the cabin sparked renewed hope. Investigators believed they were getting closer to understanding the events of that night. The townspeople, who had waited so long, now felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Could Daniel still be alive? Had he been held somewhere nearby all these years? Or had the cabin only been part of the trail left behind by those responsible? Questions raced through everyone's minds, and the answers were still just out of reach. Daniel's mother, despite her age, insisted on visiting the cabin. She walked through the broken doorway carefully, her heart pounding with anticipation. The smell of damp wood and decay filled the air. She ran her fingers along the rough walls, as if hoping to feel the presence of her son. For a brief moment, she imagined him standing there, alive and safe, before reality reminded her that 15 years had passed. Mark explored the surrounding forest, following every clue, feeling a mixture of grief and determination. He refused to give up, convinced that understanding what had happened to his brother could finally bring closure. Experts examined the cabin and the area surrounding it for evidence. They discovered footprints that had been preserved in hardened mud, markings on the walls, and even fragments of a rope. Each piece told a story, though the full story remained hidden. Forensic scientists worked tirelessly, piecing together every detail, hoping to uncover who had been involved and how Daniel had ended up missing. As the investigation unfolded, the town was gripped by a renewed sense of purpose. People volunteered to help with searches, provided historical photos, and shared memories they had long forgotten. The discovery of the Buick and the cabin brought the community together, all united by the hope that justice and truth could finally be found. The story of Trooper Daniel Harris was no longer just a mystery, it was a collective journey, one that had spanned decades and touched everyone who had lived through those years of uncertainty. Despite all these findings, the central question remained: where was Daniel? Every clue brought them closer to understanding the circumstances of his disappearance, but the man himself had yet to be found. Detectives warned the family that answers might still be incomplete, but they also promised to follow every lead until the truth was uncovered. For Daniel's mother and brother, this was a promise they clung to, a lifeline in a sea of years-long pain and uncertainty. The discovery of the Buick, the notebook, and the cabin had revealed a path, a story that had been hidden for 15 years. But the final chapter, the one that would answer where Daniel had gone, and what had truly happened, was still to be written. The town, the family, and the investigators all waited, knowing that the end of this long story was finally within reach. As the investigation moved forward, the tension in the town reached its peak. Everyone wanted answers, but the truth had remained stubbornly out of reach for 15 long years. Detectives, guided by the evidence from the Buick and the hidden cabin, continued to comb the surrounding forests with painstaking care. Every tree, every patch of disturbed soil, and every hidden trail was examined. Drone footage captured areas unreachable on foot, while ground teams methodically cleared underbrush, hoping to uncover something that could finally lead them to Daniel Harris. The family, exhausted yet determined, remained at the forefront. Daniel's mother refused to leave the town for even a day, and Mark slept little, consumed by thoughts of his brother. They pored over maps, diagrams, and old photographs of the roads and forests, trying to find connections the police might have missed. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The tracks from the Buick, the traces around the cabin, and eyewitness accounts all pointed toward a remote part of the forest that had been rarely visited by locals. It was a dangerous area with uneven terrain and thick undergrowth, but it seemed to be the final piece of the puzzle. The breakthrough came one crisp morning when a team of searchers, following faint animal paths, stumbled upon an overgrown path that appeared human-made. It was partially concealed by fallen trees and thick vines, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Detectives carefully followed the path, and as they moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder and heavier, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Then, amidst the thick greenery, they saw it, a hidden cellar entrance, partially buried and camouflaged with brush. The discovery electrified everyone. The detectives immediately called in a team of forensic experts and structural engineers to ensure the site was safe to explore. Daniel's mother and Mark were there, tears streaming down their faces, hearts pounding with a mix of fear, hope, and anticipation. Slowly, carefully, the entrance was cleared, revealing a dark, narrow staircase that descended into the earth. Flashlights illuminated the steps as the search team descended, each footstep echoing in the confined space. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. At the bottom of the staircase, they found a small, hidden room. It was surprisingly intact, despite the years. Old furniture, dust-covered belongings, and remnants of clothing suggested someone had lived there, perhaps for an extended period. And then, in the corner, under a makeshift blanket, was Daniel Harris himself. He was thin, fragile, and older than his years should have suggested, but he was alive. The sight was overwhelming. His mother rushed forward, crying and embracing him, while Mark knelt beside them, unable to contain his emotions. Daniel, though weak and disoriented, managed a small, grateful smile. Daniel's story began to unfold in the days that followed. He explained that after following the suspicious Buick on the night he disappeared, he had been ambushed by two men. They had forced him into their vehicle and taken him deep into the forest. At first, he had been held in a hidden location near the cabin, but over time, the men abandoned the site and left him in the cellar-like structure as a way to hide their crime. He survived by scavenging what little food was left behind and relying on nearby streams for water. His survival instincts and determination had kept him alive all these years, despite extreme hardships. The town was stunned by the revelation. How could someone survive in such conditions for 15 years? Daniel's endurance, courage, and will to live became a symbol of hope and resilience. People came forward to provide medical care, food, and clothing, helping him slowly regain strength. The local hospital conducted thorough examinations, revealing that while Daniel was malnourished and weak, he had no permanent damage from the ordeal. Emotional and psychological support was provided as well, helping him process the trauma of those long, terrifying years. Meanwhile, detectives intensified their efforts to find the men responsible. With Daniel's testimony, combined with evidence from the Buick, the cabin, and eyewitness accounts, they were able to track down two suspects who had been living quietly in a nearby town. Both were arrested and brought in for questioning. Under pressure, they confessed to the abduction, explaining how they had panicked after a routine robbery and decided to hold Daniel to prevent him from reporting them. The confession provided the town with a sense of closure, and justice finally began to take shape. The community rallied around Daniel and his family. Local organizations provided support, donations, and counseling. Schools held assemblies to honor the trooper who had endured unimaginable circumstances and had survived. Daniel's story became a symbol of perseverance, the power of hope, and the importance of never giving up, even when the odds seem insurmountable. People who had long forgotten his disappearance were reminded of the human spirit's strength and the impact one person's survival could have on an entire community. For Daniel, the return to normal life was not immediate. He struggled to adapt to the changes in the world and to the simple comforts he had missed for so long. Television, phones, and modern technology were overwhelming at first, and his days required careful adjustment. But with the support of his family and the town, he slowly regained confidence. Simple things, like walking through familiar streets, enjoying a hot meal, and reconnecting with friends, became milestones of a new beginning. Every small step was a triumph after 15 years of isolation and fear. The emotional reunion between Daniel and his family captured the hearts of the town and even drew attention from national news. Stories highlighted his resilience and courage, framing his survival as nothing short of miraculous. But for Daniel and his family, the real victory was not fame or recognition, it was the ability to finally be together, to heal, and to reclaim a life that had been stolen from them for so long. As the investigation concluded, the town decided to commemorate the discovery of Daniel and the resolution of the case. A small memorial was erected near the edge of the forest, not only honoring the trooper who had survived but also reminding everyone of the power of community, vigilance, and compassion. Visitors came from far and wide, inspired by the story of courage, hope, and the triumph of the human spirit. In the end, Daniel Harris's story was no longer just a tale of disappearance and mystery. It became a testament to survival, a lesson in never giving up, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can shine through. The rusted Buick that had lain hidden for 15 years had finally led to the truth, revealing the incredible journey of a man who refused to surrender to fate. And as Daniel looked out at the forest that had been both his prison and his refuge, he felt a quiet sense of peace, knowing that the long nightmare was over and that a new chapter had begun, one filled with life, love, and endless possibilities. The town would never forget the trooper who vanished in 1985, and neither would the world. His story served as a reminder that courage, patience, and the relentless search for truth can conquer even the most unimaginable circumstances. Daniel's life, once marked by fear and uncertainty, was now a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.